Hi, friend. Welcome to Holly's Highlights, a podcast designed to encourage, inspire, and equip you to intentionally live your life full of purpose. I'm your host, Holly Kirby, motivational speaker, leadership cultivator, marketing strategist, and personal cheerleader. Let's check out today's highlight. Today we're looking at being the leader others follow. And I have as guest with me today, Scott Harding, who's the general manager of Larry H. Miller Honda. Honda offers sales and services of new Honda automobiles and used vehicles, as well as service repairs and maintenance and part supplies. Scott currently leads a staff of roughly 100 employees on a daily basis. He serves as the current president of the Utah Honda Dealers Association, as well as he sits on the governor-appointed board for the state of Utah that helps steer the Utah Motor Vehicle Review Committee. He's also a former committee member for the Ford Parts. Being in the industry for 27 years, 26 of those have actually been for the same company, which is amazing. So welcome, Scott. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
So tell us a bit about how you got started in your industry. 27 years, that's incredible.
Yeah, I'm pretty fortunate. I basically, once I graduated high school, I really kind of looked at something that would maybe match with what I had been decent with through my high school years. And two of those things were I was pretty good at sales, and I really enjoyed being around people. So I had a family friend that was in the business, had been doing it for a number of years, and we actually sat down and he kind of shared some insights on what the industry was about, and I really felt that it would be a good fit for me. So I've been really fortunate to get into an industry and into a career that I just kind of stuck with ever since.
Now, during those years, you've served in a lot of different leadership roles, right? What has that looked like?
Yeah, so as far as the leadership roles that I've served in, I've ran sales teams, and then I ran dealerships. I've served in a capacity of running multiple or overseeing multiple dealerships. Basically, most of my career in doing this has just kind of been evolution, right? One role led to the next, led to the next, led to the next, which is kind of a good way because you can kind of stair-step your way up as you learn. And I didn't have to swallow too big of a pill at once, it didn't seem like.
Wow. Can you tell us about those leadership experiences that you have? What's maybe one or two of what's been your biggest challenges as a leader?
Well, I think as I think of the biggest challenges that I've had, one of them that comes to mind is expecting others to be me. And I don't mean that in an egotistical way or an arrogant way. Everybody's different. Everybody has their own personality. Everybody finds their own way to find their groove or get in a stride. And one thing as a leader that can be very difficult is when you expect everyone to be just like you. And that's not really healthy either in an environment of a team, because what makes great teams is, multi-dimensional aspects of it, and having people on your team that are better at things that maybe you're not as good at. Another thing that I would say is it took me a long time as a leader to understand that let's just say you have 20 employees. If you have 20 employees, it sounds like it would be really easy for all of them to adapt to the one leader. But that's not how it works. It's actually reverse. I think in leadership, you're one leader, but if you want to be effective in leading your people, you have to adapt to however many people you have. So in this scenario, those 20 people, you have to get to know them. You have to get to know what makes them tick. You need to get to know what motivates them. You need to connect with them and care about them and invest and just communicate. So I think those two things, it would be expecting people to be just like you are. That can be a challenge as a leader. And then understanding that you have to adapt to a lot of different types of personalities and a lot of people.
Wow, that's great advice. So is that kind of your hidden secret? Because for as many years as I have known you, you've always been that leader that other people want to follow. So can you give tips for our listeners on how to be that leader others want to follow?
Sure. I think that starts with putting the right people in the right spots. I read a book a number of years ago by Jim Collins called Good to Great. And one of the concepts in there is getting the right people on the bus and then getting them in the right seats on the bus. And so I really think that having the right people is one of the first things you got to do. I think communication is key. keeping the right people involved and knowing what you're talking about and being fair with the proper expectations. So, communication, I think a lot of people, and myself included, we become a little disenchanted or distracted of following somebody that we don't get communication from and that we don't have feedback from on how we're doing or what we could do better. I think another thing that would come to my mind, and these are all just real basic, right? But I think that sometimes the basic things are the most important things, is it's important to show people how you do something or how you want them to do something and why you want it done that way, because I believe that then they can get some buy-in. When they see your vision, they can embrace it. When they see that there's a benefit to doing it a certain way, they can embrace it. So I think that's really important. If you've got the right people and you've got the people that can get you across the finish line in a good position, you really got to let them buy into the project, and you got to let them buy into your concept and know why you do something and how you do it. The last couple things that I would say are also kind of simple things, but they're important. I mean, if you can't do these things, you're going to find yourself really challenged as a leader, and you're going to find yourself also, challenging people to follow you, that they're not going to want to follow you. You got to be willing to make the tough decisions, and that's some of the loneliest days as a leader, is when you have to make the tough decisions. And that could be in whether to promote someone or to not promote them. It could be drawing a hard line on integrity issues, and if somebody's crossed that line, how do you handle that, and ultimately, do you have to dismiss someone from your team? I think those tough decisions that you got to make really kind of show your colors as a leader, and they build that equity that others want to invest in there, or it builds equity in your leadership with the people that are following you. And the last thing I would say, and it sounds kind of clichéic, but I really do believe in honesty. And I know the industry that I've been in doesn't have a great reputation for honesty. And I think that if you are honest and you do things in an honest way and you train in an honest way and you give honest feedback and you give honest expectations, I really think that people admire that, and the people that are following you admire that. And then they can buy into your concepts a little bit more, because ultimately I think we all follow somebody because we want to make sure that they're going to help us get to the next level, or they're going to help us provide for our family, or they're going to help us learn more that's going to help us in life or in business. And so I think honesty is a really a simple thing, but it's something you got to work hard to defend every single day, because there's a lot of options out there put in front of leaders that dishonesty looks like it could be very rewarding in the moment, but that comes out in the end. People see how forthright you are in the way that you deal with things.
Now, you mentioned that there's a lot of options for leaders, and that at times it can be isolating. What or where are some resources that perhaps you turn to help and develop you as a leader and grow and strengthen as a leader?
So the first thing I would say, I read a book years ago, and it talked about why do people go and pay a lot of money to go to a seminar or hear a speaker, and the speaker tells them do this or this or this, but out of all those people that go there, very few of them follow through with the plan. I really think that first and foremost, you got to look at these resources and you got to determine if you're going to follow through with them. If you get advice from somebody, it's wise to take it if it's served them well. So the first resource that I've used over the years has been books. I think it's kind of cool that if you pick somebody, current or in history, that was really good at something, and if you had the opportunity to sit down and have lunch with them and ask them some questions, you'd probably jump at that opportunity. My opinion is that's kind of how a book works, right? Is that there's all these great, successful people out there, or, current or past, and if they've written a book or had a book written about them, that gives you the opportunity to tap into what they know. And so books are a really, really important resource if you want to grow. My team, I usually have us reading a book, not all the time, but quite often we're reading a book, and we do a chapter a week, and then we have one of our team members lead us through a recap of that chapter, each week in our meeting. And I think that's really, really informative. I think that books, some people are a little overwhelmed with, hey, I don't have time to read, or I don't have time to work that into my schedule. And I think that you just have to take bite-sized pieces of it. which, think about it, even if you read a page a day, you'd get through, at least a 300-page book a year. And so books are really important. So I would encourage, finding good books on leadership or self-help, things like that. And there's a lot of great ones out there. Second thing I'd say is, listening to good counsel and tuning out the bad counsel. There's a lot of people that have strong opinions and they want to give you an opinion on how you should be as a leader or a person or in things that you manage. And I would really look and make sure you're taking good counsel versus bad counsel, because sometimes bad counsel comes across as good counsel, but I think you just got to it's got to pass the sniff test. Is the person that's giving it, are they successful? Do they have a good track record? Or what they're asking you to do, is it fit kind of in the same vein of the direction that you're going? But I think good counsel is very important. I've been fortunate in my career and in my life to have a lot of good counsel, and I really seek that. And then when I find that good counsel, the people that would give me good feedback or good advice, I really am, I really go after that and I embrace it. So the third thing that I would say is a good resource. Sometimes over the years, I felt that the tough parts of my job were just that. They were just tough parts of my job. They were bumps in the road. They were valleys, along my trek. But what I've found is that the tough things that you encounter, those are usually where you're going to grow the most. I like a quote I've used for years. I don't know where I heard it. I just kind of used quite often over the last 20 years or so. But I heard somewhere that wisdom comes from experience. And basically, what that means to me is that if I want to have an education about something, or I want to be more successful with a scenario, sometimes you just got to go through that scenario and you got to go through that experience. And even if it's not real glamorous or fun, you can learn from it. And so I think that the tough parts of your job can teach you a lot. Right now, in 2020, where we're sitting right now, there's been a lot of tough things about life and our job, especially as leaders. It's been challenging navigating teams through this pandemic. It's been challenging, keeping everybody's head on straight, with work schedule changes and life changes. But I really think that some of those tough parts of what we're going through, those are the opportunities for us to challenge ourselves with thinking and with strategy and then application. And so I think, again, the tough parts of our job can really be a great resource to grow us into what we want to become in the future.
Wow. Now you mentioned books, that you are definitely a book reader. Mm-hmm. And I'm sure our listeners right now are wondering, okay, what books? Because they can't soak up enough of what you're saying right now. It's great information and such of help to leaders. So what books might be out there that you would personally recommend that you've read?
Well, there's quite a few of them, and it really kind of depends on what type of leadership style or what type of personality that you have. That one I mentioned, Jim Collins' Good to Great, I know that's used a lot by professors at universities. I mean, it's a really good business book, but it's not real exciting to read. It's not real dynamic. There's some other ones that are kind of popular right now. There's one that I read last year called Relentless. That's a really good one. It's a little aggressive and a little raw, but it's really, really, I mean, it's based off of the gentleman that was the trainer for Michael Jordan and some other great athletes, and it's a really incredible book. Extreme Ownership is one that's a real popular one right now. And the current one that we're reading as a management team it's called The World's Most Powerful Leadership Principle, How to Become a Servant Leader. The author's a gentleman named James Hunter, and it's a really easy one to read. It's very practical. It really is good. And we've really enjoyed that. It's not a real long book, but there's a lot of other books that I've really enjoyed over the years. There's one by Tony Dungy called The Mentor Leader. Well, he also has one called Quiet Strength that I really like. Those are just a handful of books that I like. Well, let me throw in one other one, and this is a really good one, and I advise most new leaders to read this one. I got to hear a gentleman named Michael Abrashoff. He spoke at a conference that I was at years ago. I sat on a board for Ford, and so we got taken back to their headquarters in Dearborn, and we really got a lot of good exposure to some great people. Anyway, this Michael Abrashoff wrote a book. It's called It's Your Ship, And that is an incredible book. He was in the Navy, and it talks about his experiences of running teams and running ships, and it's really, really good book. He's got a couple other books also if you like that one.
Okay. Also, as you mentioned, the tough bumps that we can experience, and that was great, taking our tough times and applying them and learning from them and helping that grow in our leadership. What has motivated you during those tough bumps? I'm sure in 27 years in this industry, 26 with one company, there's been some bumps. So how do you keep going? What motivates you through it?
Well, I think what motivates me is using what I have to the best of my ability. So not that I want to get religious or spiritual in the conversation here, but I do think that we all have a certain level of ability. And I feel this, I guess, this need to go out and do the best that I can based on those abilities. One thing that I've always tried to do is as I walk away from a day, a week, a month, a year, is I ask myself 3 questions. Could somebody have done a better job than I did at whatever I was doing? The answer to that question should always be yes, because there's always somebody better. So the following 2 questions would be, who would that person have been and what would they have done? By asking those questions, it kind of helps you identify who your next mentors need to be. It also helps you kind of identify some of the things that they might have done better and how they would have done it, and apply that into how you're going to do it next time. Another principle that I would say to making it through those tough times is you got to burn your boats and not quit. I think that quitting or underachievement is probably one of the biggest epidemics that we have in society. People quit way too soon, and unfortunately as a society we make it way too easy. I think that as you learn to quit and give up, it becomes easier and easier to quit and give up. And as you learn to fight and to hang in there and to persevere through it, it becomes harder and harder to quit. So I think that part of it is just realizing that there's going to be good days and bad days, and you just take those as they come, and you realize that, you know, everything in life there's good and bad. Sometimes the bad spots make you more grateful for the good times.
I really liked when we were talking earlier how you just said that the concept of leadership is compelling, and it was the whole idea of being able to share what you know that seems to feed the desire to know more and learn more. And the idea that you mentioned was that teaching a person how to fish versus just giving them a fish, and how that's a rewarding concept. I think that's a great outlook on that as well, and being able to reflect on what leadership abilities can look like. Through all of this, though, again, you just continue to stand out as that person, that leader that others want to follow. Have you had that in your life? Who is or who was your Scott Harding, and who do you admire as a leader?
Yeah, that's a good question. I've been pretty fortunate to have some pretty good leaders in my life. Not everybody has great parents. Not everybody knows their parents, but I had really good parents, and my dad has been one of those mentors to me. He wasn't in the same business, but he's a very educated person, a wise person, always gave very good counsel, always took time to listen to what I had to say and give me good advice, and not emotional advice, but, you know, good, sound, practical advice and business advice. So my dad was one. The company I work for, the Larry Miller Group, I was really fortunate to get to know Larry Miller and spend time with Larry Miller, and I got to work with him for a number of years before he passed away. And I appreciated the things that he taught me directly and indirectly. Larry Miller was a very demanding person to work for. He was a perfectionist in a lot of ways, and anytime that I was going to be around him, or the thought that he might call and ask me a question, or I'd be in a meeting with him, that made me prepare even better so that I would not let him down. I really wanted to surprise him. I really wanted to be a good steward with what he had entrusted me to run with parts of his business. Another good mentor that I had is a guy named Bryant Henry. And Bryant worked for our company for a lot of years. And Bryant has this great ability to talk to people about tough things and show them areas where they can improve without making them feel offended or discouraged. Part of the way that he does that is he's a very humble person, and he's a very successful person, and he's a very kind person, and he's a very consistent person. And so I admired dealing with him. He didn't shy away from having the tough discussions that I needed to have. And he put a lot of thought into the discussions he would have with me that he wouldn't lose my attention, right? He gave me really good, tangible, realistic advice, but he also didn't just drop the bomb and walk out of the room. He took the time to work through it and to help me. The last one that I would say is, I told you I like to read, and I like a lot of things about U.S. history. One of the historical figures that I really admire and I really like, the more and more that I study him, the more and more that I like him, is George Washington. I have been able to travel back and see a lot of the historical sites and obviously get to know some of the things that he was about. Some of the things that I like about George Washington, in fact, I have a picture that I like to look at that's of him, and it just reminds me that sometimes you might be the only one that believes in the project, but sometimes that's all it takes is one person to believe in it and to keep pushing forward. He was a guy that believed in what he was doing, and he also had a lot of moments of despair. In fact, if you do the research on him, he lost far more battles than he won. As a record goes, he was a failure if you just went off wins and losses. But he seemed to win the battles that were the important ones, right? And he didn't let the losses discourage him too much. He had moments where large portions of his army, his troops, quit on him. Walked out right before battles, right? He had challenges of not enough equipment and not the right equipment and weather challenges. In fact, they say that some of the biggest challenges that he faced were just the idea of having the right supplies and food and shoes and clothing for his soldiers. So you think about that and you think of how tough you'd have to be, how resilient you'd have to be, how committed you'd have to be. And he probably spent a majority of his day not only looking at strategy to go win a war, but how do I keep all of these men engaged in the task at hand, even though there's incredible obstacles. So I would say that the people that have influenced me are some really good mentors. My dad, Larry Miller, Brian Henry, who again went out of his way to take an interest in me a long time ago, and then a historical figure in George Washington.
Is there anything that any of them told you, or even a quote in what you've read for George Washington, that has just stuck?
Well, I'm kind of a quote guy by nature. I like them, and I kind of agree with what Vince Lombardi once said. He did not coin most of the phrases or most of the quotes that he uses. He took them from other people, and he said that other people seem to be able to put his feelings into words better than he could. And so he really liked, using quotes from other people. And so I like that as well. One thing about leadership, a quote that I had a mentor of mine share with me a long time ago, was that simple things are easy to do and they're easy not to do. And if I think about that, it just makes so much sense every day. You have this choice. I mean, most of the things that make us successful or make us fail are simple. They're not complex, right? But within those, simple things are almost like it's easy to do them, but it's almost more easy not to do them. So you have that decision every day if you're going to stay disciplined, if you're going to stay focused, if you're going to, be grateful for that fire in your belly that compels you to go out and do better, or you're going to make the decision to not do this or not do that. And a lot of times when you're the leader, if your leadership position also puts you in a position to where you run a company or a team or whatever, that can become difficult because you have full autonomy over your schedule. You get to show up when you want to the office. You get to leave when you want. You get to choose if you go play golf in the afternoon or go to lunch or leave early. And again, those are all simple things that you could go do, but sometimes you need to not do those, right? Because they're not going to necessarily lead to success. And so that discipline, that quote, simple things are easy to do, they're easy not to do, that for me is kind of a guiding light and helps me have some discipline in my actions each day.
You have a lot on your plate. Definitely have a lot on your plate, and I can't thank you enough for your time with us today. What do you find of interest to just unwind from everything that you do take on as your leadership role?
Well, I think that, I was reading something years ago that was interviewing at the time the CEO of Disney Corporation, and they said, what are the most important parts of your success? And one thing that he said is he's got to have a good diet, but he's also got to exercise frequently, and you have to have a hobby. And I think though that work-life balance can be a really challenging thing for all leaders and all people that are really chasing down some dreams and goals, even if it's not in the workplace. It may be as a full-time parent, or anything else that you might be working towards being most successful at. So I think for me, the things that I like to do to get my batteries recharged, I do enjoy some aspects of exercising. I enjoy going to sporting events and watching sports, and I used to enjoy playing sports when I was a little bit more capable. I like cycling. I like cycling because it gets me out by myself. It gets me out able to clear my head and think of things and get some exercise, and it can be challenging. But I also like being alone, or we live here near the Rocky Mountains, they're right out our back door. And so I like getting up in the mountains, and I like doing just about anything up in the mountains. I like to spend time at the lake, whether it's fishing or just doing things on the lake. I like riding ATVs. I like any of that. But I really found that and maybe it's because I'm around people so much every day. That's pretty much what the majority of the hours of my day are occupied with, is interacting with people, whether it's an employee, a customer, a vendor. So I really like getting out and being alone. And I think that's really important for me. And I've got, my wife supports that. She understands that. It doesn't take it personal that if I want to go be alone. I've found that it's really important for me to spend time alone and get away and have a change of scenery. And fortunate enough, I'm able to do that right here where I live. It's very convenient.
Nice. Now, if you could go back and encourage or inspire or even equip yourself as a child, looking back, what would you tell your young self?
Well, there's a lot of challenge that you go through as a child, especially as a teenager. And I remember going through high school and kind of feeling the pressure of what I wanted to become or what I was going to become. And then as I kind of got a little bit better understanding of, what it takes to go out and build a life for yourself, that was a little bit intimidating to me. And I think that a lot of high school and definitely college students, at some point or another, they feel this overwhelming need to identify who they are going to be or what they're going to be. What I would tell myself if I went back then is I would say the things that you perceive to be the challenges or the toughest things that you're going to go through, whether that be, in junior high, high school, college, whatever stage of life you're in, those are the exact things that are going to forge you into who you become. So the things that sometimes we chalk up as the bad parts of life, or the things that aren't, they're not glamorous, it wasn't fun, this is, a tough spell to get through. I really think that those are the moments that define you. Right. I believe that doing the tough things in life, they forge that sharp edge. I think the last thing that I would say is I used to really think that I was a little bit disadvantaged because I didn't, as a kid, I wanted what other kids, might have had, or I wanted maybe life a little easier where I didn't have to go out and do, chores or mow lawns or do things to earn money. But the way that we were raised is that we if we wanted it, we had to go work for it. And it really wasn't just given to us. I mean, we grew up in a great home, but it wasn't that there was just an open checkbook and whatever you want, come and get it. We had to go work for it. And the idea of learning a good solid work ethic, I didn't appreciate that as much as a kid or a teenager. But I will tell you right now is that a good work ethic will set you apart from 90% of the people that you encounter in the world once you become an adult. And so if I could go back, I would tell myself, embrace the development of a good work ethic. The things that you don't think are good or fun to do, those are the exact things that are going to set you apart and probably make you more successful than people that grew up in an environment that didn't have to learn a good work ethic.
Absolutely. Well, Scott, this has been great information. Thank you so much for your time. Where can our listeners connect with you?
Pretty much on Facebook is where somebody can get a hold of me or see what I'm up to.
Okay. Thank you, Scott. Thank you for being a leader of your character, but especially thank you for your willingness to take time to invest in other people and to share with other people how they can step up and be a leader that others want to follow.
Thank you.
Thank you for joining me on this journey of life. I hope that today's highlight has been encouraging, inspiring, and equipping so you can go out and live your life full of purpose. I'd be honored if you'd take a moment to leave a review, or better yet, subscribe. We can also stay in touch by joining my email list at hollykirby.com. That's HOLLYCURBY.com. Until next time, make it a great day for a great day.